Do you remember those forgotten appetizers you could only find in old cookbooks? They filled party tables with simple, creative bites everyone counted on. How did we let those little classics fade away? Ham salad pinwheels were the quirky little snack that somehow showed up at nearly every family get-together, neighborhood party, or church social back in the day. You would take slices of sandwich bread, flatten them out, spread on that creamy ham salad mixture, roll it up tight, and slice it into neat little spirals. It looked way fancier than it really was, which is probably why every old cookbook with curled pages swore by them. Ham salad itself was a thrifty recipe made with ground ham, mayonnaise, and whatever odds and ends you had in the fridge, sometimes relish, sometimes chopped pickles, even hard-boiled eggs when you were feeling extravagant. It stretched leftover meat into enough filling for an entire party platter, and those pinwheels made sure nothing went to waste. They were the kind of thing you saw at baby showers, school fundraisers, and potlucks where everyone brought something homemade. Over time, they quietly slipped off menus as fancier finger foods took over. Shrimp mold with crackers is one of those dishes that sounds like a dare now, but was considered peak elegance in the 1960s. Picture a wobbly, pastel-colored gelatin mold on the center of the table, filled with bits of shrimp, diced celery, and a creamy, tangy base, usually thanks to mayonnaise or cream cheese. It was the kind of appetizer you spotted at cocktail parties, holiday dinners, or those once-a-year neighborhood events where folks pulled out their best recipes. You would serve it with buttery crackers, and everyone would politely scoop a little on their plate while pretending they were at a fancy hotel banquet. The shrimp mold was a sign of the times when gelatin was not just for dessert and molded food was the ultimate showpiece. Recipes for this were clipped from women's magazines and tucked into community cookbooks, right next to lime jello salads and aspics. It may sound strange now, but back then, the shrimp mold meant you had made an effort, and nothing impressed like a shimmering, seafood-filled centerpiece wobbling in the middle of the table. Pickle and Bologna roll-ups were the ultimate frugal appetizer that made every potluck, party, and picnic table feel complete. You would grab slices of Bologna, cheap, easy to find, and always in the fridge. Spread them with a little cream cheese or mustard, roll them around a dill pickle, and secure the whole thing with a toothpick. That was it. No complicated steps, no fancy ingredients, just pure, practical snack engineering. It was the kind of food you saw in old church cookbooks and school event guides, where every recipe had to be affordable and able to feed a crowd. The saltiness of the pickle mixed with the soft Bologna made for a snack that was weirdly addictive, especially if you were a kid sneaking one off the plate before dinner started. Over the years, they quietly disappeared as deli platters and store-bought hors d'oeuvres took over. But those little roll-ups were a lifesaver for families who wanted to stretch ingredients and still show up with something on the table. Celery sticks with pimento cheese were the crunchy, creamy appetizer that stretched from southern kitchens all the way to potlucks in every small town across America. You took sturdy stalks of celery, trimmed them up, and filled them with that bright orange pimento cheese spread, the kind made with shredded cheddar, diced pimentos, a little mayo, and maybe some secret seasoning passed down from your grandmother. It was simple, satisfying, and just fancy enough to feel like you brought something special to the table, even when grocery money was tight. You saw these celery boats at family reunions, baby showers, and church suppers, nestled between deviled eggs and jello molds. They were crunchy, cheesy, and gone in minutes, especially if you had kids circling the snack table. Somewhere along the way, they vanished from most parties, replaced by store-bought dips and vegetable trays that never quite hit the same. But for anyone who remembers them, celery with pimento cheese was more than just an appetizer. It was a reminder of how to make the most of what you had and do it with a little style. Tomato aspic bites are the kind of appetizer that could only come from an era where gelatin ruled the dinner table. You would take seasoned tomato juice, mix it with plain gelatin, let it set until firm, and then slice it into neat little cubes to serve cold with toothpicks. Sounds odd today, but back then, this was considered downright sophisticated, especially when you arranged them on a platter with olives, celery, or pickles. Tomato aspic showed up at luncheons, church socials, and neighborhood gatherings, often clipped straight from community cookbooks with pages curling at the edges. It was part salad, part appetizer, part conversation starter, and completely normal during the mid-century boom of molded foods. The tangy tomato flavor, seasoned with Worcestershire or lemon juice, was refreshing, especially for hot summer get-togethers where you needed something cool and light. People loved it because it looked fancy but cost next to nothing to make, which was always a winning combination for busy households. Hot cheese olive balls were the perfect little party trick hiding in those old spiral-bound cookbooks your grandmother probably kept in a kitchen drawer. You would wrap salty green olives in cheesy dough, pop them in the oven, and out came these golden, flaky bites with a gooey center and a briny surprise inside. They were strange, addictive, and absolutely everywhere at vintage cocktail parties and family get-togethers. You could make a whole tray with barely any ingredients, just flour, butter, cheese, and a jar of olives, and still impress a room full of guests. That was the genius of old cookbook recipes. They were built for tight budgets, but never felt skimpy. The combination of sharp cheddar and salty olives was bold for the time, but it made these snacks unforgettable. They looked fancy, tasted indulgent, and disappeared fast, especially if you left them on the table next to a punch bowl. Somewhere along the way, they vanished from party menus, but back in the day, nothing said you had your act together like a platter of hot cheese olive balls straight from the oven. Canned Vienna. Sausage canapés were the appetizer you pulled together when payday was still a week away, but you wanted to show up with something. You would open a can of those soft little sausages, slice them up, and stack them on crackers with a dab of mustard, cheese, or relish, whatever you had in the fridge. It sounds humble now, but back then, that little plate of canapés meant you made an effort, even when the pantry was running low. Vienna sausages were cheap, easy to store, and a staple in homes where stretching meals was just how you lived. You saw them at school events, potlucks, and family gatherings where every dish told a story of making the most with what you had. Those little sausage bites filled bellies, fueled conversations, and kept parties going on a dime. They might have disappeared as fancier snacks took over, but anyone who grew up on them remembers how proud you felt bringing a full tray of appetizers to the table, even if they came straight from a can. Radish Roses and veggie trays were the edible art that turned up at every potluck, shower, or holiday dinner when someone wanted to make the vegetable tray look extra special. You would take crisp radishes, slice them just right, soak them in ice water, and watch them bloom into delicate little rose shapes. Paired with celery sticks, carrot curls, and maybe a few olives, it turned plain old vegetables into a centerpiece worthy of the church basement or community hall. It was simple, budget-friendly, and gave off that feeling that someone took the time to make things look nice, even when groceries were stretched thin. Old cookbooks were full of instructions for radish roses and other vegetable carving tricks, and if you had a steady hand, you could turn a plain platter into something worth talking about. Over time, the art of vegetable trays faded, replaced by store-bought dips and pre-cut carrots that never looked half as nice. But for those who remember them, radish roses were not just food. They were proof that even the simplest ingredients could be turned into something beautiful. Sardine and cream cheese spread was one of those Depression-era staples that somehow snuck its way into mid-century parties and stayed there for a while. You would mash up canned sardines with cream cheese, maybe toss in some lemon juice or chopped onion, and spread it onto toast points or crackers. Sounds unusual today, but back then, it was a clever, budget-friendly way to turn pantry staples into something that felt special. Sardines were cheap, full of protein, and easy to store, which made them a go-to for households stretching every dollar. Paired with creamy cheese, they became a bold, salty appetizer that showed up at potlucks, luncheons, and card games across America. You would find the recipe scribbled on index cards, tucked in church cookbooks, or clipped from magazine pages your grandmother saved. Sure, the flavors were strong, but they filled a table, stretched the grocery budget, and gave people a little bite of something different. Over time, fancier appetizers took over. Jellied chicken salad cubes were one of those appetizers you had to see to believe. And once you did, you could not forget them. You would mix cooked chicken, chopped celery, maybe some pimentos or olives into a savory gelatin base, pour it into a mold, and slice it into neat little cubes once it's set. Served cold with toothpicks, it was part salad, part finger food, and completely normal if you were flipping through an old community cookbook from the 1950s or 1960s. Back then, gelatin was the blank canvas for all kinds of creations, and savory salads in wobbly cube form were considered modern, practical, and just fancy enough for special occasions. You saw these cubes at women's club luncheons, church events, or the neighborhood potluck where everyone showed off their latest recipe finds. Sure, it sounds strange now, but back then, molded salads meant you knew your way around a kitchen and a grocery budget. They quietly disappeared as times changed. Cheese and pineapple skewers were one of those appetizers that turned up at nearly every 70s potluck or backyard party, and somehow, they never felt out of place. You would take sharp cheddar cheese cubes, pair them with sweet canned pineapple chunks, and thread them onto toothpicks for a simple, sweet and savory bite. It might sound like an odd combination today, but back then, it was peak retro entertaining. Every old church cookbook or women's magazine had some version of it, usually right alongside recipes for molded salads and Jell-O rings. The bright yellow pineapple and bold orange cheddar made the platter pop, and the mix of tangy, sweet, and salty flavors was weirdly addictive. They were easy to make, required almost nothing from your pantry, and dressed up a party table in a way that felt festive without breaking the grocery budget. Somewhere along the line, they quietly disappeared from menus, but anyone who remembers those neighborhood get-togethers knows a plate of pineapple and cheese skewers always meant the party was about to get started. Egg and olive tea sandwiches were the dainty little bites that showed up at baby showers, church teas, and bridge club meetings when presentation mattered just as much as the food. You would mash up hard-boiled eggs, chop green olives, mix them with a little mayo, and spread it between slices of soft white bread. The crusts came off, the sandwiches were cut into neat little triangles or fingers, and suddenly it felt like you were at some fancy afternoon tea, even if you were just in the church basement or someone's living room. They were light, affordable, and used ingredients every home had on hand, which is why they became such a mainstay in old community cookbooks. Sure, egg salad might sound plain today, but those green olives added a briny punch that made every bite stand out. You never saw a bridal shower or ladies' luncheon without a platter of these sandwiches back then. Over time, they faded from the party table, replaced by store-bought platters and deli trays, but for anyone who remembers them, egg and olive tea sandwiches were proof you could make something feel special with just a few pantry staples. Spam pickle poppers were the kind of appetizer that could only come from an era when stretching meat was an art form and canned goods ruled the pantry. You would slice thick cubes of Spam, hollow them out just enough, and stuff them with relish, cheese, or whatever little extras you had sitting in the fridge. It sounds a little wild today, but back then that salty, savory bite was exactly what you wanted for a party or potluck. Spam was cheap, easy to store, and practically a household staple during those decades when budgets were tight and creativity ran high. Old cookbooks and homemaker pamphlets were full of recipes designed to turn Spam into everything from main courses to little appetizers like these. Poppers were the perfect solution, bite-sized, filling, and just unusual enough to get people talking around the snack table. You could dress them up with a sprinkle of paprika or keep them plain, but either way, they showed up at gatherings when you needed to bring something, but money was tight. Spam pickle poppers may have vanished from most parties today, but they were once a thrifty, quirky way to feed a crowd. Cucumber cream cheese rounds were one of those appetizers that looked far fancier than they actually were, and that was exactly the point. You would slice crisp cucumbers into neat rounds, top them with seasoned cream cheese, maybe sprinkle on some herbs, and just like that, you had a platter ready for a garden party, bridal shower, or retro luncheon. They were simple, refreshing, and cool enough to serve on hot summer days when turning on the oven was out of the question. Recipes like these filled old community cookbooks, usually right next to Jell-O molds and tea sandwiches, as the go-to solution for affordable, quick appetizers that still looked elegant. You could whip up a whole tray in minutes, and they fit right in with the lace tablecloths and pastel napkins that marked mid-century entertaining. Over time, they got overshadowed by store-bought veggie trays and prepackaged dips, but cucumber cream cheese rounds had their moment. They reminded everyone that even when money was tight and the menu was basic, you could still bring something crisp, cool, and classy to the party. Sour cream and onion chip dip with ruffles was the snack table essential that somehow ended up at every neighborhood party, family gathering, and backyard cookout for decades. You would mix dry onion soup mix straight into a tub of sour cream, give it a stir, and suddenly you had a creamy, tangy dip that paired perfectly with those ridged potato chips. It sounds simple because it was, but back then it felt like magic. The kind of magic only old cookbook recipes and pantry staples could deliver. You never needed fancy ingredients or hours in the kitchen to pull this one off, which is why it became a crowd pleaser everywhere from church socials to football parties. The ridges on those chips held the dip just right, and the salty crunch with the creamy onion flavor made it addictive in all the best ways. You could dress it up with chopped chives or keep it basic, but either way, that bowl of dip disappeared fast. Somewhere along the way, pre-made dips took over, but anyone who grew up with this classic knows homemade chip dip always hit differently. Bacon-wrapped prunes, or as they were famously called, devils on horseback, were one of those appetizers that looked strange on paper but never lasted long on the platter. You would take a pitted prune, sometimes stuff it with cheese or almonds, wrap the whole thing in bacon, and bake it until crispy on the outside and sweetly chewy in the middle. It sounds unusual now, but back then, it was peak retro party food, salty, sweet, smoky, and just daring enough to get guests talking. Old cookbooks loved recipes like this because they used affordable ingredients, stretched your grocery budget, and still made you look like you brought something special to the gathering. You would spot them at cocktail parties, potlucks, or those once-a-year neighborhood events where everyone tried to show off their best recipes. Over time, devils on horseback faded from menus, replaced by trendier snacks and fancier appetizers, but they had their moment. Crab Rangoon dip with wonton chips was the creamy, cheesy appetizer that brought a little American Chinese takeout flair straight to your party table. You would mix crab meat, usually the canned or imitation kind, with cream cheese, seasonings, and maybe a little green onion, then bake it until bubbly and golden. Paired with crispy fried wonton chips, it was crunchy, creamy, and full of that savory richness that had people hovering around the snack table. Recipes like this exploded in the 70s and 80s, showing up in suburban cookbooks, magazine clippings, and those spiral-bound recipe books your grandmother kept tucked away. It was inspired by the crab rangoon you got at takeout joints, but this version was easier to make for a crowd and a lot cheaper. You would spot it at potlucks, family get-togethers, and backyard parties where everyone brought something to share. Corned beef cheese balls were the savory little appetizers that made their way from Depression-era cookbooks straight to mid-century party tables. You would mix softened cream cheese with canned corned beef, roll the mixture into bite-sized balls, and coat them in herbs, nuts, or crushed crackers, whatever you had on hand. It sounds humble now, but back then, this was a practical, flavorful snack that stretched ingredients and still looked fancy on the platter. Corned beef was affordable, easy to store, and popped up in recipes everywhere when grocery budgets were tight. Pair it with creamy cheese, and suddenly you had a crowd-pleasing appetizer perfect for potlucks, showers, or the kind of neighborhood get-togethers where every dish told a story of making do. These cheese balls filled bellies, made use of pantry staples, and showed off a little creativity in the kitchen. Over time, fancier hors d'oeuvres replaced them, but anyone who grew up with those bright red cookbooks and handwritten recipe cards remembers how much pride came with bringing a tray of corned beef cheese balls to the table. Apple butter and cheese crackers were the sweet and savory little snack that snuck onto appetizer tables in old farmhouse kitchens and small-town potlucks alike. You would spread smooth, spiced apple butter onto buttery crackers, top it with sharp cheddar cheese, and suddenly you had a bite-sized appetizer that balanced rich, creamy, and tangy all in one. It sounds fancy now, but back then, this was pure practical cooking, a way to stretch simple pantry staples into something that felt a little special. Apple butter was often homemade, simmered down from orchard apples and spiced just right, while sharp cheddar was one of the cheeses most families kept on hand. Put them together, and it was a comforting little snack that felt like fall, family, and old cookbook traditions all at once. These crackers showed up at harvest festivals, holiday parties, and church gatherings where every dish had a touch of homemade charm. Stuffed cherry tomatoes with ham spread were the colorful little appetizer that turned up when you needed to make a table look impressive without blowing the grocery budget. You would hollow out tiny cherry tomatoes, fill them with a creamy ham salad mixture, usually chopped ham, mayo, and a little relish, and arrange them neatly on a platter. It sounds simple because it was, but these bite-sized snacks felt special, especially at bridal showers, graduation parties, or any gathering where presentation mattered. Old cookbooks loved recipes like this, combining frugality with a little flair so you could stretch ingredients and still feel proud of what you brought to the table. The pop of bright red tomatoes filled with creamy, savory ham salad made them a conversation piece, even when the ingredients were as basic as they come. You would spot them at family reunions, holiday parties, or those small-town potlucks where everyone showed off their best recipes. Over time, they quietly disappeared. But those stuffed cherry tomatoes were once a reminder that with a little effort, even the humblest snacks could steal the show. Canned mushroom caps with breadcrumb stuffing were the modest little appetizer that made you feel like you brought something fancy to the table, even when your grocery list said otherwise. You would pop the stems out of button mushrooms, fill the caps with a seasoned breadcrumb mixture, bake them just right, and suddenly they looked like hors d'oeuvres from a high-end party. Truth is, this was pure frugal cooking from those old community cookbooks that knew how to stretch ingredients. You would spot these at church suppers, graduation parties, or anywhere folks needed affordable snacks with a little flair. The breadcrumbs added crunch, the mushrooms brought that earthy bite, and if you were lucky, you might sneak in a sprinkle of cheese or herbs to dress them up. They were filling, easy to make in batches, and they gave off that polished party feel, even if you whipped them up in a tiny kitchen with barely stocked shelves. Over time they faded out, but mushroom caps like these once stole the show. Party Franks in barbecue jelly sauce were the ultimate quirky potluck favorite that filled crockpots and snack tables all across America. You would toss mini hot dogs into a slow cooker with grape jelly and chili sauce, let the whole thing simmer, and like magic, you had a sweet, smoky, tangy appetizer everyone hovered around. It sounds wild now, but back then, this recipe was clipped from cookbooks and magazines that specialized in stretch-the-budget entertaining. You never needed expensive ingredients or hours in the kitchen to make a whole tray of these. They showed up at birthday parties, block gatherings, and those once-a-year church socials where every dish had to feed a crowd. Party Franks were easy, they looked fun, and they vanished off the plate in no time. Somewhere along the way, they slipped off the snack table, but for anyone who grew up with that sticky sweet aroma from the crock pot, they are impossible to forget. Liver sausage and pickle canapés were the bold little snacks that packed more flavor than their simple ingredients would suggest. You would spread rich, salty liver sausage onto crackers or toast points, top them with thin sliced pickles, and there you had it, a bite-sized appetizer with a punchy, old-fashioned kick. Recipes like this showed up in 1950s cookbooks, right next to deviled ham spreads and jellied salads, proving that even the most unusual combos had their moment. Liver sausage was affordable, easy to store, and brought that savory richness to party tables, especially when meat was scarce or pricey. You saw these canapés at cocktail parties, small-town gatherings, and those holiday dinners where every family pulled together what they had. Over time, flavors shifted, but those little liver and pickle bites stuck around in memory. For folks who lived through leaner years, they were a reminder that making something bold and filling never needed much more than pantry staples and a little creativity. Cracker sandwiches with cheese and pickle relish were one of those pantry-based snacks that made sure nobody showed up to the party empty-handed. You would grab some saltine crackers, sandwich them with processed cheese slices and a dollop of sweet relish, and stack them high on a plate. They were simple, salty, a little sweet, and they disappeared faster than you could make them. This was peak old cookbook ingenuity, stretching cheap shelf-stable ingredients into something snack-worthy for potlucks, picnics, or school events. Everyone had crackers, everyone had cheese, and pickle relish gave it that tangy punch to keep things interesting. They might not have won any beauty contests, but they filled a snack table without draining your wallet. Over the years, fancier appetizers took over, but those humble cracker sandwiches once meant your family showed up prepared and ready to share. Spicy tomato juice shots were the bold little starter that made you feel fancy even when your appetizer budget was running low. You would pour cold tomato juice into shot glasses, add a splash of Tabasco or Worcestershire sauce, and serve them up as a quick, alcohol-free kick to get the gathering going. This one was pure retro charm, straight from old cookbooks and women's magazines that promised impressive party tables without much effort. The bright red juice looked striking, the spice woke up your taste buds, and suddenly, even a modest get-together felt elevated. You would find these shots at luncheons, bridal showers, or cocktail parties where every detail mattered, but budgets were tight. Somewhere along the way, people swapped them for fancier drinks, but those spicy little tomato shots once set the tone for a fun, affordable gathering that never took itself too seriously. Marinated beet slices on rye rounds were the thrift meats flair appetizer that somehow felt fancy and practical all at once. You would take sliced pickled beets, layer them on small rounds of rye bread, and finish them with a swipe of cream cheese or sour cream. It was tangy, earthy, creamy, and came straight from those old farm cookbooks that knew how to stretch every crop. Beets were easy to grow, rye bread was hearty, and the combo turned simple ingredients into a party-worthy snack. You would see these at potlucks, card nights, or any gathering where homemade food was the pride of the table. They might sound humble today, but back then, they made you look prepared and resourceful. Beet slices on rye have mostly faded from appetizer trays, but for anyone who grew up in farm towns or close-knit neighborhoods, they were a small bite with big meaning. Cheese-stuffed sweet peppers were the colorful little appetizer that brightened up party trays in the 70s, no matter how tight the budget was. You would slice mini sweet peppers, scoop out the seeds, and fill them with herbed cream cheese or a seasoned cheese spread. They were crunchy, creamy, and the kind of snack that looked impressive without much effort. Perfect for backyard barbecues, bridal showers, or potlucks where everyone brought something homemade. These peppers showed up in those old recipe booklets and homemaker cards your grandmother probably kept tucked away in the kitchen. The bright reds, yellows, and oranges made the table pop, and they disappeared just as quickly as you made them. Over time, they slipped off snack tables as packaged party platters took over, but stuffed sweet peppers once stood for practical, colorful entertaining on a dime. Oyster cracker. Seasoned snack mix was the crunchy, salty snack that made an appearance at nearly every gathering when you needed something easy, cheap, and crowd-pleasing. You would toss plain oyster crackers with ranch seasoning, dill, or whatever spices you had on hand, bake them up until crispy, and serve them in big bowls at the party. This was pantry-friendly, budget-smart entertaining, straight out of old community cookbooks and church fundraisers. You could stretch a single bag of crackers into a whole snack table filler, and the flavor made sure they disappeared fast. They popped up at school events, backyard picnics, or football parties when nobody wanted to spend big, but everyone still expected to munch on something tasty. Over the years, fancy snack mixes replaced them, but seasoned oyster crackers were once the reliable, easy answer for gatherings of every kind. Pineapple cream cheese dip was the retro party dip that showed up at bridal showers, luncheons, and family gatherings when you wanted to bring something a little sweet, a little savory, and completely addicting. You would mix softened cream cheese with crushed pineapple, pecans, and sometimes a little green onion, then serve it with crackers for scooping. It sounds unusual now, but this sweet and savory combo was clipped from community cookbooks all across the country. Pineapple was canned, affordable, and added a bright tang to balance the creamy, rich cheese. This dip showed up at tables with Jello salads and molded appetizers, part of that golden era of party food built on pantry staples. Over time, it slipped off the menu, replaced by pre-made dips, but anyone who remembers those church socials or family potlucks knows pineapple cream cheese dip meant the snack table was officially open for business. Crispy canned artichoke hearts with dip were one of those appetizers that sounded fancy, but the recipe came straight from old cookbooks built for tight grocery budgets. You would drain canned artichoke hearts, bread them lightly, fry them up golden brown, and serve them hot with a creamy dipping sauce. It felt upscale, but the ingredients were basic pantry staples, which is why you saw them at retro parties and neighborhood get-togethers. Artichokes from a can were affordable, easy to store, and could be dressed up for guests without much effort. These crispy bites looked impressive next to the cheese balls and deviled eggs, but they were pure, practical cooking. Over time, they vanished from appetizer trays, replaced by frozen snack foods, but crispy canned artichoke hearts once proved that simple ingredients could still steal the show. Originally created for Queen Victoria's Jubilee, Cherry's Jubilee brings a royal touch to the table, making its historical significance part of its charm. It can easily be adapted into a non-alcoholic version for family-friendly events, ensuring its universal appeal. Serving it over ice cream is classic, but layering it in parfaits or as a crepe filling adds a creative twist. The flambe technique not only captivates diners with its dramatic presentation, but also enhances the dessert's rich flavors. While traditional recipes feature cherries, variations using different fruits or liquors invite customization. Cherries, Jubilee's blend of history, versatility, and theatrical presentation keeps it a beloved classic, offering a special experience for today's diners seeking both tradition and innovation. Fruit cocktail cake is a throwback to when bakers loved using whatever was in the pantry, and canned fruit cocktail was a staple. This cake mixes the canned fruit, including the syrup, with standard cake fixings like flour and eggs. It's crowned with a brown sugar topping that gets all nice and crispy in the oven. It was super popular for its ease and the fact that you could whip it up on a whim. Often served at community potlucks and family reunions, this cake was a go-to for its convenience and crowd-pleasing sweetness. As fresher and more natural ingredients became the norm, though, this cake kinda took a back seat. It's typically baked in a square pan and served straight from the dish, making it the perfect comfort food at family gatherings. The moist texture with that sweet, crunchy top makes it a simple pleasure, just a real cozy, old-school dessert. Deviled ham spread is a savory and creamy spread made from ham and various seasonings, typically served on crackers or bread. The term deviled originally referred to the addition of spicy or zesty ingredients, which gave the spread its distinctive flavor. This classic appetizer originated in the United States in the late 19th century and gained popularity for its versatility and ease of preparation. The spread is made from finely ground ham mixed with mayonnaise, mustard, and spices, creating a tangy and flavorful mixture. Deviled ham spread is often enjoyed as a snack or party food, where it can be served alongside various accompaniments. The name deviled refers to the addition of spices or heat, which gives the spread its distinctive kick. Liverwurst sandwiches were bold. You knew at the moment someone unwrapped one across the table. That unmistakable scent, rich and meaty, mixed with sharp mustard or sliced onions, hit like a wave. The sandwich itself was unapologetically old school, usually served on rye or pumpernickel bread, often from a family who still shopped at the neighborhood butcher. Liverwurst was spreadable sausage, soft but full of iron and flavor, and it had no intention of going unnoticed. It was the sandwich your grandpa swore by, the one your parents either embraced or exiled. And for kids, it was a gamble, either a lunchroom legend or a quick trade for something with peanut butter. But for those who loved it, liverwurst was gold. It was hearty. It was grown up. It was tradition sliced thick and pressed between slices of something dark and sturdy. Liverwurst never begged for your approval. It knew it was not for everyone. Today, you hardly see it outside specialty stores and deli counters. But for a time, it was part of the rotation. Loved by few, remembered by all. Let's talk about a meat that's making a comeback, but was once considered a novelty. Buffalo. Back in the day, smoked buffalo was a rare treat. It was tough, gamey, and had a strong flavor that wasn't for everyone. But as people started to appreciate more adventurous flavors, buffalo made a comeback. While it's still not as popular as beef or pork, it's definitely gaining ground. It was a popular choice for those who wanted to try something a little different and show off their culinary prowess. They're still rare to find, but if you ever come across smoked buffalo on a menu, it's definitely worth giving it a try for a taste of barbecue history. Ambrosia Salad, once a staple of festive gatherings, has seen its popularity wane due to its heavy reliance on canned fruits and marshmallows, clashing with modern dietary preferences that favor fresh, unprocessed ingredients. The advent of more sophisticated desserts and salads, which offer complex flavors and textures without excessive sweetness, also contributed to its decline. Additionally, the visual appeal of Ambrosia Salad, with its mix of colorful fruits and marshmallows, no longer captivates in an era where aesthetics in food are increasingly valued but demand a more refined presentation. Despite this, Ambrosia Salad's nostalgic value keeps it in the memories of those who grew up with it, suggesting a possible pathway for reinvention that aligns with contemporary tastes and health considerations. Butterscotch Brownies, or blondies, mix it up with brown sugar, butter, flour, eggs, and baking powder, all jazzed up with butterscotch chips. These goodies swapped out chocolate for a sweet caramel-like vibe and caught on fast. They were super easy to whip up, making them a go-to for anyone needing a quick dessert fix without the intense richness of chocolate. Their ease of preparation and ability to store well made them popular for potlucks, school functions, and holiday treat exchanges. Over time, though, as bakers got more into gourmet and unique flavors, blondies weren't the main event anymore. Usually, you'd find them cut into squares, laid out on a platter, perfect for grabbing a bite without any fuss. The combo of a chewy middle with a bit of crunch around the edges really made these stand out. Snowball cakes are all about that winter vibe, with their fluffy marshmallow filling and a coating of shredded coconut that looks just like snow. Inside, there's a chocolate sponge cake that keeps everything rich and interesting. These treats got their name from their cool, snowball-like appearance, making them a hit during the holiday season. They used to be all over the place as pre-packaged snacks from brands like Hostess, known for their fun and distinctive look. But as people started choosing more natural and less processed options, snowball cakes kind of faded out. They were usually wrapped up all neat, making them easy to grab and go. Rumaki is an appetizer made of marinated chicken livers and water chestnuts, wrapped in bacon and broiled. This tiki-inspired dish originated in the mid-20th century and quickly became a popular appetizer at cocktail parties and tiki bars. The chicken livers and water chestnuts are marinated in a mixture of soy sauce, ginger, and brown sugar, then wrapped in bacon and secured with a toothpick. The result is a savory sweet treat with a delightful contrast of textures. The crunchy water chestnut, tender chicken liver, and crispy bacon create a unique and flavorful combination. The appetizer is often garnished with green onions or pineapple for a tropical twist. This dish showcases the creative fusion of flavors and cultures that defined mid-20th century tiki cuisine, making it a standout at themed parties and exotic gatherings. Fried Bologna sandwiches were the working-class answer to gourmet, cheap, greasy, and absolutely perfect. A slice of bologna slapped into a hot skillet until it curled at the edges, sometimes scored in the center to keep it flat, then dropped onto bread and finished with mustard, cheese, or whatever was around. It sizzled, it popped, it smelled like something you were not supposed to enjoy this much. And kids loved it. The edges got crisp, the center stayed soft. It was the kind of sandwich that left a grease spot on the bag and a smile on your face. Fried bologna was not subtle, but it was reliable. It was warm and familiar. It made lunch feel like breakfast and dinner all at once. Parents made them quickly, often with one hand on the stove and the other helping with homework. It was the sandwich of multitaskers, of big families and thin budgets. And yet it tasted rich. It felt like a treat. Today you barely see them unless you go looking. But for those who grew up on it, fried bologna was not just food. It was a full sensory memory wrapped in white bread. The Southern loved making use of every part of the pig, and this next one was no exception. I'm talking about chitterlings or chitlins. These are the intestines of the pig. And while they might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you think of barbecue, they've been a beloved part of Southern barbecue culture for generations. Barbecued or smoked chitlins are prepared by thoroughly cleaning and cooking the intestines until they're tender and flavorful. The key to making chitlins enjoyable is all about seasoning and preparation, turning what might seem like an unusual ingredient into a delicious barbecue treat. Now, I'm not saying everyone will love them, but they definitely have a loyal following. But like many traditional foods, chitlins are falling out of favor. It's a sad day for those who appreciate the bold flavors of the South. Black Forest cake, celebrated for its layers of chocolate cake, cherries, and whipped cream, has experienced a decline as preferences have moved towards simpler, more minimalist desserts. The cake's elaborate assembly and rich flavor profile may not appeal to a health-conscious audience that prefers desserts with less sugar and lighter ingredients. Furthermore, the global palate has become more adventurous, seeking out new flavors and dessert concepts beyond the traditional. Despite this, the cake's deep-rooted cultural significance and potential for ingredient innovation, such as using less sugar or incorporating alternative flours, offer opportunities for a modern resurgence, particularly among those who appreciate the art of baking. Snowball cookies are these awesome little treats that are perfect for the holidays. They're a type of shortbread packed with nuts, like almonds or pecans, mixed into a buttery dough, then rolled in powdered sugar while they're still warm. They end up looking just like little snowballs, which is super cute around Christmas. These cookies are favorites because they're easy to make, delicious to eat, and perfect for sharing, which is probably why they show up at so many holiday parties. They're known by different names around the world, but no matter what you call them, they're a sweet tradition. The dough needs to chill to keep the cookies from spreading too much, so they stay nice and dense. Chicken salad sandwiches were the quiet heroes of the lunchroom, the kind of sandwich that looked unassuming but delivered comfort in every bite. They started with leftover chicken, chopped fine or shredded, then folded into mayonnaise with bits of celery, sometimes a hint of onion, maybe a touch of mustard or dill. It all depended on who made it. Every family had their version. Some were creamy, some were chunky, some were elegant enough for tea parties and school lunch alike. Slapped between slices of white wheat or a buttered roll, chicken salad was never flashy, but it never disappointed. It felt like home, like Sundays turned into Mondays. It was cold, clean, and quietly satisfying. Kids who got a chicken salad sandwich in their lunchbox were either praised or pitied, depending on who you asked, but they always remembered it. Today, chicken salad has migrated to cafe menus and plastic deli containers, far from its humble homemade origins. Speaking of Southern traditions, this next one was a staple too. Yeah, let's turn our attention to pork jowl, an often overlooked cut of meat that's been a staple in Southern barbecue for years. The pork jowl was basically the cheek of the pig, and while it might not sound glamorous, it was packed with flavor and had a unique texture that barbecue lovers appreciated. It's fattier than bacon, but with a more intense flavor. Smoked or barbecued pork jowl was typically seasoned with a blend of spices and then cooked slowly to develop its rich, smoky flavor. Pork jowl might not be the most mainstream barbecue item these days, but it's a delicious example of how barbecue traditions make the most of every part of the pig. Fondue, a beacon of the 70s dining scene, created memorable moments around pots of melted cheese and chocolate, fostering a unique communal eating experience. Its decline in popularity can be traced back to the end of the fondue party trend, as people sought quicker, less interactive dining experiences due to changing lifestyles. The rise of fast food and ready-to-eat meals emphasized convenience over the communal, leisurely dining experiences fondue provided. Additionally, the health concerns associated with the high-calorie content of cheese and chocolate fondues contributed to its waning popularity, as dietary trends shifted towards lower fat and lower sugar options. Despite this, fondue retains a nostalgic charm and has potential for resurgence with healthier ingredients and innovative dining concepts. The Watergate Cake, popping up in the 70s, was all about riding the wave of the famous scandal it's named after. This pistachio-flavored cake, made with pistachio pudding mix, sports a funky green color and a nutty taste, lightened up with some club soda. It's usually decked out with a frosting that's also got pudding in it and sprinkled with pecans, making for a pretty unique look and texture. The whole novelty of its theme and the connection to a wild moment in politics helped make it a hit. But as people started digging more natural and less artificially flavored sweets, its star faded. Watergate cake was typically a sheet cake, super easy to slice up for casual gatherings. Poke cake hit the scene in the 70s and got everyone excited because you could do so much with it. After baking a simple vanilla or chocolate cake, you poke holes all over it and fill those up with jello, pudding, or sweetened condensed milk. This trick lets the filling soak into the cake, making it super moist and adding layers of flavor. Jello pushed this idea big time, showing everyone how a plain cake could turn into a showstopper. It was a hit because you could tweak it with different fillings depending on what you were into. But as tastes got more sophisticated and folks leaned towards less sugary stuff, poke cake kind of lost its spotlight. It was usually served in a big dish, looking casual and family-friendly. You'd often see it with a fluffy layer of whipped cream on top, maybe some fruit or sprinkles too, just to make those flavors pop. Crab Rangoon is a crispy wonton filled with a creamy crab mixture, deep-fried to a golden crisp. This appetizer blends savory and sweet flavors, making it popular, especially among seafood lovers. The origins of Crab Rangoon are somewhat mysterious, but it's believed to have been created at Trader Vic's, a tiki-themed restaurant in San Francisco in the 1940s. The filling typically includes cream cheese, crab meat, green onions, and seasonings, wrapped in a wonton wrapper and deep-fried. The result is a crispy, creamy, and flavorful appetizer that pairs well with sweet and sour or plum sauce. Crab Rangoon's unique combination of flavors and textures has made it a favorite at Chinese-American restaurants and tiki bars. It's a great example of how American cuisine has adapted and reinvented traditional dishes from other cultures, leading to its iconic status. The Chowane Sandwich was chaos held together by two buns, and somehow it worked. Born in southeastern Massachusetts, this Frankenstein creation placed a mound of crispy chow mein noodles smothered in thick brown gravy between two hamburger buns. The result was a crunchy, savory, totally illogical meal that became a school lunch staple in some corners of the country. Kids would unwrap their foil-wrapped mystery and find a puddle of sauce and starch that somehow filled every craving and left fingers coated in grease. This was the kind of sandwich you could not eat neatly, and that was half the fun. The noodles poked out the sides, the sauce soaked into the bread, and no two bites were ever the same. The chow mein sandwich was a lunchtime dare wrapped in cultural mashup, a reminder that not all great foods make perfect sense on paper. Over time, regional oddities like this one gave way to standardization. One bite, and you were somewhere between comfort food and total confusion. And somehow that felt exactly right. Okay, now that we've covered the respectable mutton, let's move on to something a bit more, shall we say, adventurous. Smoked squirrel. In the early days of barbecue, this little critter made quite a splash at gatherings. If you think about it, the squirrel is kind of like nature's version of a barbecue snack, small, tasty, and with just the right amount of seasoning. The smoked squirrel was typically prepared by slow smoking the meat until it was infused with a rich, smoky flavor. It was a favorite among pioneers and early settlers who needed to make the most of their resources. While it might sound a bit unusual today, it's a great example of how barbecue traditions evolve based on what's available and what people enjoy. These days, you might not see a smoked squirrel on your local barbecue menu, but it's definitely a dish that deserves a place in barbecue history. The pineapple upside-down cake, a marvel of sweetness and texture, charmed its way into hearts with its caramelized pineapple topping and moist cake base. However, as dessert trends moved towards more sophisticated and less sugary options, this cake's presence dwindled. The move away from canned fruit and processed ingredients, which are central to the classic version of this cake, in favor of fresh, less processed alternatives, also contributed to its decline. Moreover, the advent of foodie culture which prioritizes novel and Instagram-worthy desserts, left the more traditional and less visually dynamic pineapple upside-down cake behind. Despite this, it remains a cherished reminder of past baking traditions, holding potential for revival with updated, healthier ingredients. Wacky Cake is also known as depression cake because it came about when stuff like eggs and milk were hard to come by. It's vegan by accident, using vinegar and baking soda to make it rise instead of eggs. This cake is all about being deliciously simple and affordable, mixing everything right in the baking pan, which means less mess too. Although it was a big deal back when fancy ingredients were scarce, it's not the showstopper it once was with all the fancy desserts out there now. Still, it remains a popular choice in vegan and eco-conscious communities for its minimal environmental impact and allergen-free ingredients. You usually just sprinkle some powdered sugar on top, and it's good to go. The moist, rich chocolate taste makes it hard to believe it's made without any dairy or eggs. It's just a smart, tasty solution when you're short on supplies. Peanut butter and pickle sandwiches were the lunchbox legends nobody admits to loving, but many still secretly miss. Born out of the Great Depression, this odd pairing was less about culinary boldness and more about making do with what was left in the pantry. Peanut butter was cheap, packed with protein, and shelf-stable. Pickles added crunch, tang, and just enough bite to wake up plain white bread. Somehow, the combination worked. The sweet creaminess of the peanut butter and the sharp, vinegary snap of a dill or bread and butter pickle created a balance that stayed with you, whether you liked it or not. These sandwiches were slipped into wax paper and handed off like rationed gold. Some kids traded them. Others guarded them with their lives. They were cheap. They were weird. And they were unforgettable. As the decades rolled on and lunch menus got glossier, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches faded from view. It might not win a gourmet prize today, but back then, it was a masterpiece made from struggle and stubbornness. Cheese and cracker trays are simple and elegant party platters featuring assorted cheeses and crackers. This versatile appetizer lets guests mix and match flavors to their liking. The tradition of serving cheese and crackers likely dates back to the 19th century when cheese was often served as part of a dessert course. Cheese and cracker trays typically include various cheeses like cheddar, brie, and blue cheese, paired with assorted crackers, fresh fruit, or nuts. The key to a great cheese and cracker tray is variety and presentation, balancing flavors, textures, and visual appeal. This appetizer is a classic choice for wine tastings, holiday parties, and casual gatherings, allowing for easy customization and encouraging socializing. The simplicity and elegance of cheese and cracker trays make them timeless, and they add a touch of sophistication to any event. Let's talk about meat that's still enjoyed in some parts of the country, but definitely not as much as it used to be: goat barbecue. Goat barbecue was known for its gamey flavor and tender texture, making it a favorite among those who enjoyed a bit of variety in their barbecue menu. Goat barbecue was typically marinated with a blend of spices and herbs before being slow-cooked or grilled. So this one falling out of flavor is a big loss for barbecue fans because hear me out. Goat meat is lean, flavorful, and packed with protein. It's still a popular choice in many cultures for a reason, but as tastes changed, so did the demand for goats. It's a shame, really. Peanut butter and marshmallow sandwiches were sticky, chewy, and completely chaotic in the best way. Unlike the Fluffernutter, which used smooth marshmallow creme, this version went old school, layering whole marshmallows right onto the peanut butter. The result was messier, thicker, and somehow more exciting. As you bit down, the marshmallows gave a stretch, and the peanut butter clung to everything: your teeth, the roof of your mouth, your fingers. It was the kind of sandwich that slowed you down, made you chew carefully, and left sweet residue in the corners of your smile. Some kids toasted it, watching the marshmallows melt into gooey bliss. Others just packed it cold and let the sandwich warm up on its own in their backpack by noon. Either way, it was dessert disguised as lunch, and it was glorious. You rarely saw it outside of grade school, but back then, it was a lunchbox secret weapon. No meat, no greens, no apologies, just joy between two slices of bread. Hawaiian Cheese Log. This festive cheese log, introduced in the 1960s, combines cream cheese, crushed pineapple, and chopped nuts, often rolled in shredded coconut to enhance its tropical flair. It reflects the mid-century American fascination with Hawaiian culture and exotic flavors. Typically served at gatherings and holiday parties, the Hawaiian cheese log offers a sweet and savory experience that complements a variety of crackers and bread. The combination of creamy cheese, sweet pineapple, and the crunch of nuts coated in coconut provided a rich textural contrast. This dish was especially popular for its ease of preparation and festive appearance, making it a favored choice for entertaining. Baked Alaska, once the pinnacle of dining elegance with its combination of cake, ice cream, and meringue, has faded in popularity due to its perceived complexity and the rise of simpler, more accessible desserts. The challenge of perfectly executing the meringue and achieving the flambé effect can be daunting for home bakers, contributing to its decline. Additionally, in a culinary landscape that values quick and straightforward recipes, Baked Alaska's time-consuming preparation makes it less appealing for everyday dessert choices. However, its dramatic presentation and the contrast of hot and cold elements retain a potential allure, suggesting that deconstructed or simplified versions could bring it back into favor for special occasions. Divinity is this super fluffy cloud-like candy that popped up in the US early in the 20th century. It's mostly whipped up from egg whites, sugar, and corn syrup, and often you'll find nuts like pecans or walnuts thrown in for a nice crunch. Making Divinity can be tricky because humidity can totally mess with it, but when you get it right, it's like eating a sweet, airy piece of heaven. It got super popular around the holidays because it's a blast to make with family and tastes like a festive treat. Over time, though, as quicker, easier sweets came around, not as many folks made it from scratch. It's usually scooped onto wax paper to set into little clouds, sometimes topped with a nut. Imagine a cake that's like a party in every slice. That's tequila sunrise cake for you. It's inspired by the cocktail, mixing up orange zest and grenadine in the batter, with a good shot of tequila to kick it up. The grenadine does its magic to make the cake look like a sunrise, all vibrant and inviting. This cake was a hit because who doesn't want to try a boozy dessert that looks as fun as it tastes? Perfect for adult parties and summer gatherings, this cake brought a zestful twist to any celebration. But as folks started leaning towards simpler and more wholesome flavors, this flashy cake became less of a go-to. When it's served up, it's usually all dressed up with an orange slice or a cherry on top, making it perfect for any bash. It's a fun twist on dessert, turning your typical cake into something that's a toast to good times. Cheese puffs, also known as gougères, are light and airy pastries filled with cheese, making for a deliciously savory treat. This French origin appetizer dates back to the 18th century and is typically made with choux pastry mixed with grated cheese, often Gruyere or Emmental. The dough is piped into small rounds and baked until golden and puffy. The result is a delicate exterior with a cheesy, flavorful interior. They are often served warm, as the cheese filling is best enjoyed when slightly melted. Cheese puffs are particularly popular at parties and wine tastings because they pair wonderfully with various beverages. The combination of crispness and cheesy goodness makes them irresistible. Their light texture and rich taste make them a perfect start to any gathering or a delightful snack, ideal for sharing with friends. Cheese and apple sandwiches were the bite you never knew you needed. Sweet, sharp, and surprisingly grown up for something packed in a kid's lunchbox. Thin slices of crisp apple, usually red or golden, laid against salty cheddar cheese and pressed between soft bread, created a mix of flavor that hit every corner of the tongue. The crunch of the apple, the tang of the cheese, it all worked. There was something about that pairing, fruit and dairy, sweet and savory, that felt more like a farmer's market find than a cafeteria mainstay. But for many kids, especially those with creative parents or fond memories of fall, it was a staple. Sometimes it showed up on wheat bread, sometimes toasted. Occasionally even wrapped in foil with a note that said, "Eat me cold," It's better that way. It was not a flashy sandwich. No bright colors or sauces. Just good ingredients and smart contrast. Over time, it faded into the background as processed snacks took over, but that apple and cheese combo still feels like one of those rare lunchbox moments when everything just made sense. Share your favorite forgotten appetizer down below and hit like and subscribe so we can keep serving up the recipes history left behind.